Hello, I'm Michael Graziano, and welcome to my music channel. I've posted a lot of my music over the past years, and you can check it out if you like. You can listen to my 9 symphonies and 8 string quartets. Yes, I wrote 9 symphonies. You're supposed to die after the 9th one, but I'm holding out pretty good so far. Today I thought I'd do something different and make a tutorial video on how to compose a symphony. The truth is, anyone can compose a symphony. If I can, you can. More than anything else, it's fun. It's just enormously fun to put sounds on top of sounds until a whole piece of music shapes up. It's relaxing. It's almost like a meditation. When I was little, I'd listen to music on the radio, and the big symphonies intrigued me the most because I'd think, how did they do that? How do you combine so many instruments? How do you create something so complex? I wanted to see inside the machinery and understand the wheels and the gears, so I studied music. And over many years, I realized it's not that complicated. Now, I'll try to pass on some of what I learned to you. The program I'll use is Finale. There's a lot of music notation programs, but I've used this one for many years now. In the old days, I used pencil and paper, which has its own challenges. Programs like Finale really make music composition possible for everyone. It democratizes it because you click notes onto staff lines and you hear the music right away. It's immediate feedback. You can tinker with your private orchestra and listen to your piece shaping up. The symphony as a form really first emerged in the classical era, so roughly starting around 1730. It has roots far back in the Baroque, even earlier, but the concept of a symphony, the organization, especially the principles of orchestration, are really first invented in the classical era, and later composers used the same principles. So a cute little classical symphony with a tiny orchestra has all the bones of orchestration. So I thought we would start with a classical symphony. You and I together will compose the first movement of a light, fluffy, happy classical symphony. Nothing dramatic, nothing profound, but it'll make us happy. I've already set up the score for 1 flute, 2 oboes, 2 bassoons, and 2 horns. And of course the standard string orchestra, 2 sections of violins, the first and second violins, a section of violas, a section of cellos, a section of those mighty low-down double basses. You can imagine maybe 5 instruments in each of the string sections. This is a very tiny orchestra. For the classical symphony, almost all first movements are in sonata form, and I'll show you how to write in sonata form. The first thing to do is to compose a first theme. It establishes the home key, in this case C major. Now we'll compose a transition, a short passage that will lead us to a second theme. We're writing what's called a continuity sketch. It's like sketching a picture in pencil first, before painting it. We'll sketch out one thread of music through the entire movement. Here and there, I'll sprinkle in some harmony ideas, just so I don't forget later. And only when we get the sketch just right, the thread of melody complete, then we'll go back and fill in the orchestration. The hard work is the sketch. The orchestration is actually much easier. Composers used to work for months on their continuity sketches, perfecting the shape of the piece. Obviously, we don't have that time, so we'll be less particular, but you'll see it'll come out beautifully in the end. One of the best ways to learn to compose is to learn to improvise. Sit down at the keyboard or whatever your instrument is and play sounds. Just try stuff. Let noise come out. Get used to letting sounds flow out. And when you compose, improvise onto the paper. You can go a little slower, more thoughtfully. You can fix things along the way, but the flow still comes from that same part of your unconscious brain that creates an improvisation. You can use any themes you want in your symphony. It doesn't have to be classical. You could steal ideas too. Write a symphony based on your favorite tune. It's entirely up to you. Make it your own. If you look up Sonata Form in a textbook, you'll see a very simple, very rigid formula. The reality is usually more complex. But first, here's the textbook explanation. You start with a first theme that establishes the first key, C major here. That's your home base. Then you transition, that's what we're working on now, to a second theme in a second key, the key of the fifth, in this case G major. Then you have a temporary ending, a flourish, like you're taking a bow. It's called a closing theme. That whole segment is called the exposition. It introduces the main themes, but it ends in the wrong key, in G major. So it isn't really done yet and needs to come back home again. Then you proceed to the rest of the movement, developing the themes. I'll tell you more about that later. For now, let's focus on the exposition, on introducing our main themes. The first theme personifies the home key, and the second theme personifies the secondary key. They're like leitmotifs. Like in a movie, you have a tune that signifies Darth Vader and a tune that signifies Luke Skywalker. Whether or not you notice it explicitly, when you're listening to a symphony, these tunes work at an unconscious level. They create a plot, a landscape for the music. The first theme is often more blunt, more catchy, more memorable, and it defines the piece. It's what sticks in your head. The second theme is usually more lyrical, softer, rounder, lighter. The first theme is like a solid rock on the ground because it personifies home, it anchors the piece. The second theme is like a leaf flittering down through the air because it represents being away from home. It represents the expectation that you'll be coming back to ground level. That structure was invented in the early classical era. That's the textbook theory. The reality is often something else. Beethoven usually sticks to the framework. The famous Fifth Symphony, that first movement, is a perfect example of a sonata form. Schubert, in his famous Eighth Symphony, does something remarkable. He completely rethinks the form. There, the second theme is the dominant one, the memorable one that defines the movement, that everyone hums to themselves. Mozart often has a whole cascade of themes, tumbling one after the next. Could be 10 different themes or motifs packed in. Mozart was a melodic genius, and he spilled tunes out of his brain left and right. A good way to start the transition is to begin with a repeat of the first theme. Here it's restated, but louder, doubled an octave higher. But the tune doesn't just repeat wholesale. In its second half, it starts to diverge from expectation, and it goes a new direction. One of the tricks that keeps music interesting is setting up expectations and then subtly diverging from them, or sometimes not so subtly, and this is the reason for the rules. In the classical era especially, there's a misconception that classical music follows the rules decorously. It's well-behaved, like polite society. And this is really not true. The rules are there to break. But the violations work. They keep your attention, only if they are rare. You have to follow the rules most of the time to create expectations, so that when you do break the rules, it makes an impact. Mozart and Haydn are full of strange, original twists on the sonata form. And in my opinion, Beethoven is uniquely situated historically. He has all the power and structure of the classical rules to give him strength. combined with his huge imaginative ability to break the rules in extreme ways, sometimes volcanic ways. Later composers can be as daring as they want, but it never has quite the same impact because they aren't working against a backdrop of classical structure. Here we'll follow the rules rather closely because this is, after all, a tutorial. I've added in some 16th notes that I think will come off as fresh. I'm searching for new material, something really different, not just repeated parts of the first theme. Classical music has a motor, a steady rhythm that's set up in your mind and runs through the whole piece. In this case, I hear the motor running at a rate of 8th notes. By throwing in these runs of 16th notes, we switch it up and keep things fresh. You'll see that I've added a C sharp, immediately followed by a C natural. That's a classical trick. The C sharp hints at the key of D, because it's the leading tone. It leads up to a D. Imagine C is the ground floor, G is the second floor, and D is the third floor. You're trying to jump up to the second floor, and you overshoot and get to the third floor. Then you settle back to the second floor. It helps establish G a little more securely by getting at it from both directions. But it's just a passing hint. The C sharp whispers to your brain, "We're reaching for D." The C natural then says, "Nope, we've reached too far and we're settling back to G." And without that little twist, you'll never feel entirely comfortable with your second key and your second theme. Now let's listen to the movement so far, the first theme and the transition that entices us away from the first theme into a new space and leaves us ready, poised to hear a second theme in a new key. I like how that works. Yes, that's a charming little transition that brings in fundamentally new material. The runs of 16th notes are surprising and switch up the rhythm for us. And I think I'll try to echo those 16th notes in the second theme to maintain a sense of continuity. So far, I've been showing you the process of composition more or less in real time. And I've done that partly to show the blind alleys and changes of mind that are inevitable. Composing is exploring, and it takes a long time to explore and discover the nice tune that you need. But in real time, it could take me 10 or 15 hours to complete this piece, and we don't have that kind of time in a tutorial video. So I'll pick up the pace here. I'm going to edit out all the false starts and blind alleys in composing the second theme. Don't think this is how I compose music. This will look much more purposeful than it really is for me. It took me 3 or 4 tries to find a melodic thread I can pull on that seemed like it worked here. I'm trying to create a second theme that's constantly moving, constantly changing. The beginning different from the middle different from the end, to create an impression of that Mozartian cascade of ideas. And rather than have a formal separation between the second theme and the closing theme, which can sound stodgy and overly compartmentalized, I'm trying to morph one into the next. The harmonic and melodic end of the second theme is the closing theme. You may have noticed Both themes, both the first and second, start up in the air. The first theme starts on a G and has to wend its way down to a C. The second theme here starts on a D and has to float its way down to a G. Starting up in the air like that, on the fifth of whatever key you're in, gives a kind of lightness to the tune, a charm. Normally, you want the two themes to be very different, like staking out a large space on the ground for your piece to live in. But my intuition here is that the two themes are already sufficiently different, and, maybe more importantly, we don't want to stake out a huge, epic space for this piece. It wants to be small and cozy. So I'm happy with the first and the second theme, starting the same way, up in the air. It helps give a musical unity to the piece. The two themes, as different as they are rhythmically, are related to each other in their deeper skeletons. You'll start to see me putting in F naturals in the closing theme, flirting with the key of C, reminding everyone that we're in G temporarily, and we're going to have to come back to the ground floor of C. It's traditional, at least in the classical era, to repeat the exposition. These tunes whiz by, polite society is chatting at the hors d'oeuvre table, and not everyone hears the tunes the first time around, so you repeat the exposition. That means the end of the exposition is crafted to join on seamlessly to the start of the piece. I think of it almost like carpentering, like designing IKEA furniture, where this fits onto that. You shape the end so that it fits onto the beginning. When we orchestrate it, we'll probably tweak the contours here and there, punch it up a bit, but the essence of it is here. I know it doesn't seem like a symphony yet, but it is. We have the essence. Now let's listen to the whole exposition from start to finish, and I'll loop it back so you can hear how nicely it flows back into the beginning. I love working through something, and then sitting back and listening to it. I like it. I like it. I hope you stay with me for the next tutorial. It may take us a few videos, but we'll build up a complete full score and it will sound magnificent. Thank you all for coming along with me.